Hello and welcome to another off-the-shelf board game review. This week we're going to look at Tsuro of the Seas. Tsuro of the Seas is a spiritual successor to the game Tsuro. In Tsuro the series, you can play 2 to 8 players, ages 8 and up. Average play times can be anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes, depending on the amount of players you have and just how cutthroat those players are. This is going to be a tutorial video where I'm going to show you how to play the game and show you a sample gameplay. Be sure to also check out my full review of the game where I'm going to go over the component quality, just how well the game plays with all those player counts, and give you my final thoughts on Tsuro of the Seas. In Tsuro of the Seas, each player is the captain of a ship, and the objective is to be the last player left standing in these extremely dangerous waters. On a player's turn, they're going to simply play a tile which is going to create a path that their ship must follow. Of course, the objective here is you got to create a path that isn't going to take your ship off the board, and you must also avoid the paths of these giant Takaiju which are traveling across this board, which want nothing more than to devour your mighty ocean-going vessel. Players will continue to place tiles on the board, creating wakes that they must continue to follow. While these Takaiju will be coming on and off the board, they'll be moving around the board, and you may even have more Takaiju enter the board as the game goes by. And when I say more Takaiju, I am talking more and more Takaiju, up to a possibility of 10 Takaiju being on this board, which are going to devour your wakes, devour your opponent's ships, and hopefully, if you're lucky, not devour your ship. The last player standing is going to be declared the winner. Can you guide your ship across these treacherous waters, avoid all the Takaiju and the other players? That is Tsuro of the Seas. Tsuro of the Seas is going to be played ever so slightly differently, and by play I should say it's actually going to be set up just a little bit differently depending on how many players you're going to be having playing the game. I'm going to show you how to play the game with a 4-player game, which is going to have 6 Takaiju involved in it, and that's the basic difference between the player counts. The more players you have, the less Takaiju start in the game. The less players you have, the more Takaiju. In a 2 to 4 player game, you start with 6 Takaiju. In a 5 to 6 player game, there's only 5 Takaiju, and in a 7 and 8 player game, the game starts with only 4 Takaiju. Now those are starting counts. You can always add more Takaiju to the game, up to a total count of 10. There can never be less than 3 Takaiju in the game. If you ever have less than 3, there are rules to bring in more Takaiju, and make sure you always have the minimum of 3 Takaiju on the board at all times. Now, I don't want to go too far into the differences between Tsuro of the Seas and basic Tsuro. I'm actually going to take a few moments to describe those differences in my full review of the game. So if you're interested in which game should get your gaming dollars, if you can only pick one of them, I'll definitely take a few moments to describe that, but I'm not going to concentrate on that. This is purely going to be a tutorial and a sample gameplay video only. To start off in the Tsuro, you're going to have to shuffle all the wake tiles and all 10 of the Takaiju tiles, and each player is going to pick a ship in their color they wish to play. Each player is then going to get 3 wake tiles, which is going to form their starting hand, and the rest of the tiles are going to be set off to the side to form the draw pile. You're then going to take a certain amount of Takaiju to form the starting board, and again, that's based on the amount of players. Since I'm showing you how to play a 4-player game, we're going to start off with 6 Takaiju tiles, and we want to make sure it's random, so we don't know which Takaiju we're going to start with. The rest of them will be placed off to the side to form a draw pile, in case we need to add more Takaiju to the board. These 6 Takaiju that you're going to start off with are going to be placed on the board in a random order. And the way these are placed is you're going to look at the board, you're going to see 2 rows of numbers. We have 1 through 6 in a blue diamond, which is going to happen to match the blue die that comes with the game. Then you have a row of 1 to 6 up here, which again is going to be in a gold color to match the gold or bronze color die that comes with your copy of the game. To place the starting Takaiju, you're basically going to roll the dice, and it's going to give you a column and a row where that Takaiju is going to be placed. So we're simply going to take the 4 for the gold and the 3 for the blue, take the top Takaiju, and we'll find the 4 column, and we'll find the 3 column, and we'll place that Takaiju there. You then spin it around as much as you want, flip it over, and that's going to be the starting space for that specific Takaiju. You're then going to do that with the remaining Takaiju to get your starting game board. If at any time when you're rolling the dice to get your starting Takaiju placement, if you roll the same location for the Takaiju a second time, you simply re-roll the dice. That's to make sure you get all the required starting Takaiju on the board, and all of them have a different unique starting location. Now you're going to notice on all these Takaiju tiles, you're going to have a series of numbers of 1 through 5, and none of the tiles have a 6 on them. I'll explain that in a few minutes when I explain how the Takaiju round starts on each player's turn, but know that every one of these tiles has a number on it 1 through 5. Now every one of these is going to have a circular arrow, which is either going to be gold or blue, and the reason why there's gold or blue is because the gold Takaiju always act before the blue Takaiju, and also the Takaiju are going to activate in ascending order based on the number that's actually in the circle. For example, if we take this Daikaiju right here, which looks like a giant sea serpent, you'll notice that there's a gold half circle, which is going to circle counterclockwise with the number 1 on it. Next to that, there's going to be a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5, which are going to face the 4 sides of the square. I'll explain exactly how that works again when I get to the Daikaiju movement. I just want to make sure you understand that all these Daikaiju do have those numbers on them, and those numbers are going to be used to judge exactly how these Daikaiju are going to move on every single player's turn. Once all the Daikaiju are placed on the board, it's now time for the players to place their ships on the board. Now each player can start anywhere on any one of the sides of the board as long as they place their ship on one of these little white lines, and that's going to be the starting location for their ship. Players are going to starting with however player order you choose. The game says start with the oldest player, but choose however your starting method you wish. In order, players are going to randomly place their ships on these little lines. And then you're ready to begin playing Tsuro of the Seas. Each player starts the game with a hand of exactly 3 tiles, and the way the rounds are going to be broken down is on a player's turn, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to roll 2 of the dice to see if the Daikaiju are going to move. And you're basically looking for a result of 6, 7, or 8. If you roll a 6, 7, or 8 total up on the dice, the Daikaiju are going to move. If you roll anything besides a 6, 7, 8, you're going to skip the Daikaiju movement and go on to that player's placement of a wake tile. Now remember how I said that each one of these Daikaiju tiles have a number on them? That's going to determine how the Daikaiju are going to move if you happen to roll a 6, 7, or an 8. If you happen to roll a 6, 7, or 8 on your Daikaiju movement phase of your turn, you're going to roll a single die that's going to judge how all the Daikaiju on the board are going to move. If you roll a 1 through 5, the Daikaiju, each one in order is going to move the listed direction on their tile. If you roll a 6, an additional Daikaiju is going to enter the board, and the current Daikaiju are not going to do anything. And to add a Daikaiju to the board, you do the exact same thing you did during setup. You're going to roll the dice to get a column on each side, and that Daikaiju is going to enter the board at that location. The trick is here that if you roll a location where there's already a Daikaiju at, you're going to roll again. But if you roll a location where a ship happens to be, for example, if a player had managed to get all the way out here on one of the wakes, and you happen to roll a Daikaiju is going to land in that location, the Daikaiju is going to land there, going to wipe that player out of the game, and the Daikaiju is going to enter that location, and this player is now out of the game. Now when the Daikaiju move, you have to follow a couple certain rules. First of all, you're going to roll 1 die for all the Daikaiju movement, and you're going to compare that to the locations for all the Daikaiju. And they're going to move in the following order. First, you're going to look for any Daikaiju that has a number 1 in their circle, and then they're going to go in ascending order. If you have 2 number 1s, and there is a blue and a gold number 1, a blue and a gold 2, all the way up through number 5, you're going to move the gold one before the blue one. So in this example, we only have 1 number 1, it happens to be a blue, and I happen to roll a 5, so I'm going to find the 5 on his tile, which shows that he's going to move this direction, and this one is simply going to move that direction. Now I'm going to look for any 2s on the board. There are none, so I'll look for 3s. I happen to have 2 3s. I have a 3 here, and actually I'm wrong. I only have 1 3, so I have the 3 here, which is going to move the direction of the 5, which is that way. I'm going to look for any 4s. I have a 4 and a 4. So this 4 is going to move first, and we're going to see them again number 5, which there is already a Daikaiju in this location. Now anytime a Daikaiju has to move to a space where there is a wake tile or another Daikaiju, the moving Daikaiju overpowers whatever is in the prior location. Now what that means is since this Daikaiju needs to move up, he is going to destroy this Daikaiju, and he's going to be removed from the board. If there happened to be a wake tile there, he would destroy the wake tile. And if there happened to be a ship on top of that wake tile, that ship would be destroyed and removed from the game. We simply continue moving all the Daikaiju for the rest of the moves, following the directions. If you get an arrow, you're simply going to rotate the direction of the arrow. And once that's done, you are done with the movement for the Daikaiju phase. Now there's only 2 ways that a Daikaiju can be removed from the game. The first one is a Daikaiju, as you saw, can devour another Daikaiju by moving onto a space. Additionally, a Daikaiju can just simply move off the board. If it does so, it's out of the game. It's put back in the bottom of the Daikaiju drop pile, and you just continue on with the rest of the turn. You do have to remember to respect the minimums though. There always has to be a minimum of 3 Daikaiju on the board, and if any time that happens that there are less than 3, you're simply going to bring more Daikaiju on the board. Now if a Daikaiju movement ever forces a player so that they can't actually place a tile on their turn, then that player is also going to be devoured. So for example, this player was positioned right here, and this Daikaiju, due to a prior turn's movement, had managed to move right here, and now this player can't actually place a tile. That means their player's ship is actually going to be devoured by this Daikaiju. Even though the Daikaiju didn't actually move onto the tile, it's actually preventing this player from placing a wake tile. And if you can't place a wake tile due to Daikaiju movement, you have been devoured by that Dikaiju. After the Dikaiju movement phase, you actually move on to the tile placing phase. And on a player's turn, they're simply going to place a tile, and then they have to follow the wake left by their ship. The trick is you can't place a tile in a way that will make your ship go in an infinite loop. You can't place a tile in a way that will make your ship follow the exact same path as another ship in the same direction. You can go in opposite directions and ships won't crash, they'll just simply pass like ships in the night. And additionally, you can't place a tile that forces your ship to go off the board unless you have no other options. And remember, if your ship goes off the board, you instantly lose. But if you happen to place a tile in a way that forces an opponent's ship to go off the board, you actually get to take some of the tiles out of their hand by exchanging tiles in your hand with tiles in their hand for tiles you like better. The additional tiles are going to be discarded because you can never have more than 3 tiles. After you're done with your movement, you're simply going to draw a tile, pull your hand back up to 3 tiles, and you've ended your turn, and you now move on to the next player's turn. Players are going to continue taking turns, rolling to see if the Dikaiju are moving, placing wake tiles, moving their ships, and trying to be the last one standing. Whoever is the last player standing, of course, is going to be the winner of Tsuro of the Seas. I have the game set up now for a 4-player game, and just to save time, I've actually placed the Dikaiju on the board and given every one of the players a hand of 3 tiles. Going to start the game with the red player, who's going to place their ship first. Blue is going to place their ship second. White is going to be third. And then finally, the black player is going to be the 4th player. Once all the players have placed their ships, we're now ready to begin the game. Starting with the red player, we're going to roll the dice to see if the Dikaiju are going to move. We need a result of 6, 7, or 8. We're going to get a 5, so there will be no Dikaiju movement. So the red player is going to look at his tiles. He's going to place his tiles, and hopefully in a way that's going to help him and hinder all his opponents. We simply place the tile on the board. We follow the wake path to its end. We draw another tile, and our turn is now over. We'll move to the blue player, who's going to roll, get a 7, which is going to be the Dikaiju action to move, so we need to roll 1 die to figure out exactly what they're going to do. We're going to get a 1, so now we're going to move the Dikaiju again in ascending order. So we look for any Dikaiju who have a number 1 on their circle. We're going to see this one has a 1. He is going to turn. We're going to look for any Dikaiju that have a number 2. We don't have any, so we're going to look for any with a 3. This Dikaiju has a 3, and we're going to see that the number 1 forces him to move this way. So if this Dikaiju doesn't happen to move again before this player goes, this player is actually already going to be eliminated from the game. We're now going to look for any 4s. We have 2 number 4s, so we need to move the gold Dikaiju first. We're going to roll this. This one's going to move the direction of the 1. This one's also going to move the direction of the 1, and now we need to look for any Dikaiju with a 5. We have 2 of them in play. We're going to move them in the direction of the 1. Gold moves first. Blue moves second. And now it's time for the blue player to actually place a tile. The blue player is going to place a tile, and he's going to try to avoid the direction of these Dikaiju. He's going to follow the wake to his end and refill his hand, and that's going to be the end of the blue player's turn. We now move on to the white player's turn. They're going to roll the die. We're going to get a 3. No Dikaiju are going to move. We're going to look at our tiles, try to place our tiles in a way that are going to help us and keep us away from those Dikaiju that are entering the board. We follow the wake to its end, draw another tile, and our turn is now over. We now move on to the black ship. We're going to roll a 3. There will be no Dikaiju movement. We're going to look at our tiles again and try to find an efficient path that's going to take us away from those Dikaiju, which seem to be gathering up early on this side of the board. We're going to follow the path to the end there. We're going to draw another tile, and our turn is going to be over. And now we move on to the red player's turn. Now the red player needs to roll a 6, 7, or 8 and hope this Dikaiju moves in a way that's going to allow him to place a tile. If he cannot do it, the red player is going to be removed from the game immediately. So we're going to roll the die. We are going to get a 5. This player cannot place a tile to save him. He is going to sail right into the Dikaiju's waiting jaws and be devoured, and the red player is now out of the game. Now, since no other player actually knocked him out of the game, his tiles are just going to be removed, added to the bottom of the draw stack, and then we're going to continue on to the next player. The blue player is going to roll the dice, going to get an 11. That's not going to be a Dikaiju movement, so now he gets to pick a tile to play and stay away from those sea monsters and hopefully stay away from the other players. We're going to play a tile, follow the wake to its end, draw another tile, and our turn's going to be over. We're now going to move over to the white ship over here, roll, get a 3, no Dikaiju movement, and now we need to figure out what tile we're going to play, and we want to get away from this mass of Dikaiju over here. So we're going to take a tile that's going to allow us to move just over here to this direction. We'll follow the wake, draw a tile, and our turn will come to an end. It's now the turn of the black ship to go. We're going to roll the dice, see if we get Dikaiju movement. We are going to roll an 8, which means the Dikaiju are going to move. We're simply going to draw or take one of the die, and we need to hope we do not roll a 2, because if we do, this Dikaiju is going to devour this player. We're going to roll the die, and we're going to get a 6, which means we get to add a Dikaiju to the board. We're going to take the top Dikaiju from the draw, roll 2 dice to see where he's going to land, and we're going to look for the 2 columns, the 4 and the 4, which will put him right here, which is not a valid space, so we're going to roll again. We're going to get a 2 and a 4, which again, not a valid space, so let's see if we can get a valid space this time. We'll get a 6 and a 5, which will be a valid space. 6, 5 column, we'll spin them, flip them over, and this Dikaiju is going to start on the game board on this space. The black ship now takes their tiles and decides which movement they want to take, and they need to do anything they can to get away from this Dikaiju, or they're going to be in a lot of trouble. Luckily, we have a tile that's actually going to help us. We have a tile that's going to allow us to pretty much do a U-turn. We're going to put the tile down, follow the path all the way to its end, and we're going to end our movement there, draw a tile, and end our turn. Back over to the blue ship, roll the dice. We're going to get a 6. We are going to get some Dikaiju movement. Roll a 5. So now we need to move the Dikaiju, following the dice, and we're going to start with the number 1 Dikaiju. We now actually have 2 of them now because we just placed this one on the board. Gold will move before blue, so we move the direction of the 5. Dikaiju will move this direction. This one will move this direction because it's number 5. We now look for 2s, which we don't have any. So we're going to now move to the 3. 5 is going to move this direction. We're now going to look for 4s. We have 2 4s. We'll move the gold one first, the direction of the 5. Blue one direction of the 5. And now we need to look for any 5s. We have 2 of them. Gold will move first. 5 shows that he rotates. This one will also rotate. That's the end of the Dikaiju movement, and now the blue player needs to place a tile. The blue player is going to place a tile, follow the wake to its end, draw another tile, and the blue player's turn is over onto the white ship. We're going to get a 5, no Dikaiju movement. We're going to place a tile. Again, trying to get away from these Dikaiju, but not putting us too much in a corner. Draw a tile, end our turn. Move on to the black ship. We're going to get a 4. We are going to place a tile. Follow the wake to its end. Draw a tile, and end our turn. As you can see, the turns can move pretty quickly in Tsuro of the Seas. Going to go ahead and continue. We're going to get an 8. We're going to get some Dikaiju movement. And we're going to roll a 2. Simply going to go starting with the number 1 Dikaiju. And we rolled a 2, so we're actually going to see that this Dikaiju is actually going to get to devour a ship wake tile. It's going to be removed from the board, added to the bottom of the draw deck. And this Dikaiju now occupies this space, putting the white ship in a lot of danger if we get some more Dikaiju movement. We don't have any 2s, so we're going to move on to the 3s. We're going to move that to the direction of the 2, putting this one back this direction. We're now going to look at our 4s. We have 2 of them still on the board, which are going to move the direction of a 2. So he's going to move back just the space he previously occupied. Then we're going to move the 5s. And we're going to move this direction. And we're going to move this direction. And unfortunately, I forgot we had that second gold number 1. It's not going to make a difference that I accidentally forgot him, and I apologize about this. He is also going to move the direction of the 2, and he would have actually moved before this one, but again, it's not going to affect the game board the way we have it set up. And don't worry, that's not a mistake that actually happens too often because you have multiple players helping you find those Dikaiju, so it's really not going to happen when you're playing the game. The blue player is going to play one of their wake tiles, and right now it's a gamble. We actually have tiles that allow us to go this direction and this direction, but we're going to go ahead and go for the gamble and hope this is going to be a good play. We'll draw a tile and end our turn. Onto the white ship, which needs to get away from this Dikaiju. We're going to roll a 7, and this might just end this player's turn if we're not careful. So let's hopefully hope we don't roll another 2. And we got a 2. This is one of those times where the other players start laughing at you as you move the Daikaiju and watch your ship get devoured, and you just removed yourself from the game. And again, since another player didn't remove this player, their tiles are not going to go to the player who eliminated them. They're actually going to go back to the bottom of the stack. We're going to continue to move the rest of the Daikaiju in the order that we have. The 1s have moved. We're going to look for any 2s, which we don't have, so we'll move to the 3s, which will move a 2 direction. Onto the 4s, which is going to put the blue player in a lot of trouble. Then we're going to move on to the 5s. And we're done with the Daikaiju movement, and now we get to move on to the black ship. Now the black ship, if they roll quite well, they may have just won the game here. We're going to roll a 5, no need to move the Daikaiju, so we're going to grab a tile and see if we can get out of the way of this rampaging Daikaiju. The waters are becoming pretty treacherous for our 2 remaining players, but we're going to go ahead and place the tile like this, follow the weight to the end, draw a tile, and end our turn, and we'll move on to the blue player. Now the blue player is in the exact same position as the red player earlier in the game. If I don't roll a Daikaiju movement, the blue player is about to be devoured and the black ship will end up winning. We're going to roll a 7 and we're going to get very, very lucky. Now let's just hope we don't roll a 1. We're going to get a 4 and we're going to move the Daikaiju, and we're actually going to be destroyed still, and the black ship is actually going to win it. But we'll finish the turn just so you can see what's going to happen. The number 1 Daikaiju are going to move the direction of the 4, move the direction of the 4. The number 2 Daikaiju is going to, we don't have those, we're going to move on to a 3 who's going to move the direction of a 2. Removing this tile from the board, we're going to look for our 4s. We have 2 of them. This one's going to move first, the gold one. A 4 means he is just simply going to rotate. The other 4 is going to rotate also. Then the 5s are going to move the direction. Gold moves first. Blue moves second, and then this player cannot place a tile. He's going to sail into the waiting jaws of the Daikaiju. His ship is going to be destroyed, and the black ship is going to be the winner. As you can see, there will be a little bit more luck in Tsuro of the Seas versus traditional Tsuro. I'll get into that in my full review of the game. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and sample gameplay for Tsuro of the Seas. Be sure to also check out my full review of the game, which will accompany this video. If you have any questions, comments, be sure to post them in the YouTube comments section, and if you have any review requests, be sure to post those also. This has been another Off the Shelf board game review tutorial video. Thanks for watching.